This video is brought to you by
Cool green clothing coming straight up out of that DMV. You know what it is. This that Baltimore designer right here. Come on now, come and show some love and show some support. Go online right now, coolgreenclothing.com, and make your purchase. Oh yeah, by the way, if you ain't cool and getting the green, you're in the way, and that's just basic.
It's your girl, Mrs. Tony 2 times, and I'm back with another episode of the Baltimore Way. In this video, we'll discuss the recent case of 65-year-old Brice Wendell Boots. He lost his life at the hands of an alleged conspiracy between his estranged wife and her nephew. But before we get into this video, please hit that like button if you're rocking with the content. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any future uploads. And of course, feel free to share this video with everyone you know. Also, if you'd like to see more episodes in the Baltimore Way series, please click the link to the playlist in the description box after this video to get caught up. Everything in this video is alleged, and make sure you watch until the end so you hear my whole story. All right, let's get right into it. Am I the only one who watches divorce court from time to time? From the OG episodes to the newest season. Whether the stories are real or sensationalized, we get a glimpse into couples' relationship problems and their quest to either make it work or walk away. Well, in this case, a contentious divorce between Brice Wendell Boots and his estranged wife, Frances Virginia Hamilton, played out to be fatal after both accused the other of harming each other physically, emotionally, and mentally. Bryce Boots, a Baltimore native, grew up in a loving home and became an exceptional athlete. During his time at Edmonton High School, he played baseball, basketball, and football. By the time he was a sophomore, he was already playing varsity baseball. A young Bryce earned many trophies, and he and his family were extremely proud of his athletic achievements. He attended Virginia Union University on a baseball scholarship after graduating high school. He also attended Towson University later on. In addition to the other sports he played, Bryce was an avid bowler. He won many tournaments. Later in life, he kept up his athleticism and competitive nature by playing cornhole. As his profession, Bryce was an experienced truck driver. Most of his career he spent with UPS before moving on to become a truck driver for Giant food stores. During his time at Giant, Bryce was dedicated to the job and did whatever was necessary to make sure stores received their merchandise. Bryce retired from Giant and donated his time and energy to his church and other organizations that helped people in need. Bryce lived in his home in Pikesville for over 2 decades. Everyone in the neighborhood adored Bryce. He was always a pleasure to be around. If you drove by his home, you were bound to hear him playing his favorite R&B song and with his great voice singing right along. Bryce was also a great dancer and just loved having a good time. Bryce always looked fly. He was very into fashion and a sneaker enthusiast. He had a creative way of styling his outfits. Bryce was also a family man and cared for his parents deeply. There's nothing he wouldn't do for them. Other family members could also say the same about Bryce. Bryce was an overall stand-up guy. With all his charm, personality, and talent, Bryce would have been a great catch for any suitable bachelorette. He later met former Baltimore police officer Frances Virginia Hamilton, and the two started seeing each other. Frances joined the department in 2001. She was a member of the department's Accident Investigation Unit. In 2007, Frances filed a lawsuit alleging that she was fired because of her color and gender, and that because she was the only Black woman assigned to her unit, she worked in a hostile and antagonistic work environment. However, the Baltimore Police Department denied those claims and rebutted that Frances was let go because an internal investigation found that she falsified numerous traffic citations. The investigation found some of the citations came from cars that had been previously junked, or the license tag she recorded was canceled or turned in. When the drivers were contacted, they told police they had never been stopped on the dates Frances had claimed on her citations. In 2011, a U.S. district judge ruled against Frances. Frances was also a lieutenant for a former Baltimore sheriff who both ran unsuccessfully for sheriff in 2010. After the lawsuit, Frances reported that she worked as a personal trainer since 2011 and was briefly employed at an Amazon distribution center, but injured her wrist and had been on workers' comp starting in 2018. Prior to her time at BPD, she reported she worked as an executive admin assistant for the U.S. Army on and off for 15 years and was discharged in 2001. Frances faced more legal trouble in a different case years later. In 2019, she pleaded guilty in Baltimore Circuit Court to fraudulent misappropriation by a fiduciary, which is a trustee. She was sentenced to 5 years probation and ordered to pay back $21,500. It's unclear when and how Frances and Brice met, but the couple got married on April 13th, 2020. Frances was about 58 and Brice would have been about 62. The marriage seemed to be troubled from the start, and the couple separated just 4 months later. 2 years later, in August 2022, Brice filed for divorce. According to court documents, Brice claimed that his wife persistently engaged in conduct, including criminal conduct, that made the marriage impossible and prompted him to leave the home for his safety, health, and self-respect. Their divorce was tumultuous. Both parties filed protective orders against each other over the years. Brice alleged theft and mental harm, and Frances alleged mental, verbal, and physical harm. In September 2022, Frances filed a restraining order accusing Brice of making threats against her and saying that since they were in the middle of a divorce, he was doing whatever he could to get her out of the house. She claimed that Brice had an uncontrollable temper and was a vengeful person. Frances claimed that her husband took all the toilet paper, paper towels, laundry detergent, and hid them. She stated she feared for her life and that Brice would be under the influence. An interim protection order was granted for that case, but a final order was denied because there was no basis for relief. Frances filed a protective order again in December 2023, alleging Brice swung and struck her when she was hanging coats in a closet. A temporary order was granted on January 3, 2024, after a judge found that there were reasonable grounds to believe Frances. The court date for the final order for Frances' petition was set on January 10th. The very next day, on January 4th, Brice filed a protective order against Frances. He claimed that Frances took out a false protective order against him. He also alleged Frances broke an agreement about not taking items out of the home. He said Frances took down cards from his parents, who are no longer on earth, and close friends and removed them. He alleged his estranged wife took an expensive watch and 4 bottles of cologne. Brice claimed that Frances owned a firearm and that she was a felon. He listed her employer as a hustler and scammer. A judge denied Brice's petition, saying Brice couldn't meet the required burden of proof. Almost a week later, on the court date for Frances's protective order, things took a chilling turn. On January 10th, 2024, at 1:32 p.m., officers were called to a rural area in Frederick County for a suspicious SUV parked with its blinkers on in a field 650 feet off the 8200 block of Crum Road. The 911 caller indicated the vehicle had been there since 7 that morning. As officers approached the 2003 Toyota Sequoia, they found blood and mud on the car. When they looked inside the SUV, they saw an unresponsive man. He was pronounced gone at the scene. The man was identified as 65-year-old Bryce Boots. His passing was ruled a homicide by the medical examiner. However, it has not been revealed how Brice lost his life. The vehicle he was in was registered to him. Investigators believe the slaying happened in Frederick County based on the evidence at the scene. Detectives went to Pikesville to Brice's home to retrace his steps and notify his next of kin. When investigators got there, neighbors and witnesses reported seeing Frances and a man believed to be her nephew at the house the night before. The day after Brice was found, deputies searched his home. Investigators found evidence of a fight inside the house and that Brice was forcefully taken against his will. In addition, investigators also learned that on the morning Brice was found gone, he was due in court to answer for Frances's allegations. He never showed up to plead his case, and as a result, Frances' final protective order was approved. The judge ordered Brice not to have any contact with Frances, directed him to leave and stay away from the home in Pikesville. The order also required Brice to surrender all firearms, pay $2,400 every month in family maintenance to Frances, and give her exclusive use and possession of a 2015 Chevy Corvette. The order was to remain in effect for 2 years. Frances received the order personally, and Brice was mailed a copy. The same day, Brice was found gone. Investigators took a look into Frances and her nephew, who was seen with her at Brice's house the night before he was found. Frances' nephew was identified as 20-year-old Keon Wilson-Hawkins. Keon had a bit of a rap sheet and had run-ins with the law starting at the age of 16. Through cell phone data, investigators were able to track Brice, Frances, and Keon's whereabouts from the night of January 9th to the 10th. On the evening of January 9th, surveillance footage from a nearby business captured Frances and Keon approaching Brice's home. Hours later, Brice and Keon left the house at 4:37 a.m. on January 10th, driving on Interstate 70 toward Frederick. The two arrived on Crum Road at 6:20 a.m. Keon left Crum Road 10 minutes later at 6:30 a.m. Evidence shows Keon went back to his house in West Baltimore. Investigators aren't saying how Keon got back to Baltimore. As the investigation continued, Brice was laid to rest on January 23rd in Windsor Mill. On February 20th, Brice's divorce attorney filed a motion for the case to be dismissed since Brice lost his life. Detectives were trying to get in touch with Frances throughout the investigation, but on February 24th, Frances Hamilton was found gone inside a home in Anne Arundel County. Although the case of her losing her life is still under investigation, it's believed she took her own life. She was 61 years old. Weeks later, on March 11th, 2024, Francis' nephew Keon was indicted on first-degree hit, conspiracy to commit hit, and carjacking in connection to Brice's abduction and slaying. Keon was arrested in Baltimore with the help of U.S. Marshals on a search and seizure warrant. His late aunt Frances was never charged with Brice slaying, but she was named as Keon's co-conspirator in abducting and ending Bryce Boots' life. Keon is currently being held in a Frederick County jail without bail. He is innocent until proven guilty. May Bryce Boots continue to rest in peace. My deepest condolences to his family and loved ones. It's very tragic that a man who loved to live his life to the fullest lost it all over a woman he was married to for just a short time. Brice is truly missed by those who had the opportunity of knowing him. Despite Frances' allegations, others who knew Brice say differently. There are so many unanswered questions, as a lot of details have been left out since the investigation is still ongoing. Questions like, how did Keon get back to Baltimore after driving to Frederick? What happened in the home before Brice and Keon left for Frederick that early morning? What was Francis's role in all of this? And why did Keon and Francis allegedly conspire to end Brice's life? What was really going on in their brief yet tumultuous marriage? It doesn't sound like they really knew each other before they got married. My condolences to Francis' family as well. It's crazy that she also lost her life and under the circumstances of her possibly ending it all. This is such a tragic tale of how a divorce ended fatally. I wonder if there was any way to resolve their issues without it coming to this. Fam, let's keep the conversation going and tell me your thoughts on this story in the comments below. All right, fam, that's it for this episode of the Baltimore Way. Thank you all so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. This is your girl, Mrs. Tony 2 times. Until next time.